The impacts of firearm violence. We are going to have a panel. As you are aware, this is one of the priority initiatives identified by the Commission in January. To highlight the importance of this initiative, the Gun Violence Archive reported that as of May 1st, 2023, 13,959 people have died from gun violence. Of those who have died, 491 were teens and 85 were children. The majority of these were deaths by suicide, but there have been 184 mass shootings in 2023 so far. I look forward to hearing from our panel members and the public on this important issue. I'd like to invite Commissioner Bunch to introduce our presenters and facilitate the panel.
Thank you, Chair Madrigal-Wise. Today's panel is a vitally important one, but it's also one that may be tough to hear at some points. I want to encourage everyone to take care of yourselves as we discuss this sensitive topic. If you need to step away at any point, please feel free to do so. With that said, I'm really excited to introduce you to our amazing panelists. We have some really great speakers today who are going to share their valuable expertise and lived experience in the areas of trauma, firearm violence, and community-based solutions for intervention and healing. First, we have Kevin Cameron. Mr. Cameron is an internationally renowned expert in threat assessment and crisis response. His model has been used across North America to identify risk, intervene effectively, and respond from a trauma-informed, recovery-oriented perspective. He's a trained marital and family therapist and registered social worker. He has years of experience working with high-risk children and their families, and his work in the field of violence threat risk assessment focuses on understanding perpetrators of violence in the context of their family, peer group, workplace, and society. I've personally taken his VITRA training several times, so I'm thrilled to have him present to us today. Kevin, thank you for being here.
A long time. Yeah, you hold it. There we go. All right. How's that? Lovely. Bless your hearts. Thank you very much, folks. Now, if I don't like what you're saying. Oh, wow. It's actually still not staying on. That's 20 minutes, eh? 19 now. All right. Bless your hearts. Thank you very much. And thank you for the invite. So I actually work on both sides of the border, United States and Canada. And as Commissioner Bunch said, work in actually three areas that usually aren't seen as interconnected, but they very much are. The fields of high-end violence threat risk assessment, crisis and trauma response, and in all honesty, family assessment, family dynamics, etc. And I could probably ask you one simple question. Because schools and young people came up, I just pose this rhetorically. But could a student be high risk for violence in school A, yet low risk for violence in school B? And if you actually consider that, then it actually means it's not all about individual pathology either. So that even though we're talking about gun violence and mental health issues, etc., the reality is 10 people can engage in the exact same act of violence, pulling the trigger, sticking a knife, etc., yet for 10 different reasons. And what becomes so compelling in the work is actually understanding the interconnectedness between a number of different things, including a term we coined several years ago, my colleagues and I, which we refer to as the trauma violence continuum. And the trauma violence continuum, in essence, denotes this. Of course, we understand that serious violence begets trauma. There's no question about that. But we also understand that trauma in and of itself can beget serious violence. What that means is we could have an individual, for instance, as a child, exposed to a daylight shooting. And in the end, maybe police show up to interview them as a witness. And by the way, they've got nothing to share. They didn't see anything. And we understand that in my career as immersed working with police also. Nevertheless, time goes on, but often no one is thought to cycle back, nevertheless, to that child, to their parents, to their caregivers, and wonder how they're doing from a trauma perspective. Well, interestingly enough, whether you're aware of it or not, I don't know. I mean, I actually haven't heard it talked about a lot today, so I sat in the back as a visitor thinking it'd be kind of cool to hear the conversation. Everybody's aware that we have come out of a 3-year pandemic, if you will, and there's still lingering effects. But I do want you to know that everything we will deal with, even from a mental health perspective, for at least the next 3 years, is laid on the foundation of what we refer to as a delayed response to trauma, meaning to a 3-year worldwide pandemic. And kind of one of the jingles I use, so in case you don't pick up on it or not, actually, as I said, work in both countries, but I am actually a born and bred East Coast boy from Halifax, Nova Scotia, Canada. So that might explain a few things as I get rattling on here. But suffice it to say that it's become very evident that when we look at trauma and trauma in human systems, including high-profile trauma, then I have a little jingle that I like to use, which is this. Generally speaking, high-profile trauma does not create new dynamics in human systems. Instead, high-profile trauma simply intensifies already existing dynamics in human systems. That has to do with mental health struggles, and that has to do with societal dynamics also. So, for instance, in the aftermath of the George Floyd tragedy, I received many calls from colleagues on both sides of the border who were in awe of the protests and or civil unrest that occurred in the aftermath of that tragedy. And as I restated to many that I have trained over the years, the George Floyd tragedy did not create or cause all of the protests and or civil unrest that occurred. Instead, the George Floyd tragedy simply intensified already existing dynamics in America. And by the way, in Canada also, for those of you interested in the broad implications. Well, then as we look at it from that particular perspective, then we say, so what did happen over the last 3 years? And I've heard some conversations with kids. When it comes to gun violence, you know that in the end, we are the most concerned with our kind of 22-year-olds down to maybe 16, 17. But I got a jingle for you, which is, especially coming out of the pandemic, regression is the norm. Regression is the norm. And what that standard means is that if you want to understand what's going on with young people, and I mean 22, I mean 20, I mean 18, 16, all you need to do is subtract 3 years from their chronological age, and then you'll understand what the flip is going on. For instance, when I work with schools and district leaders, principals, counselors, and others, and for that matter, even teachers, I'll say, you know what? If you subtract 3 years, then that explains why grade 12 teachers are going, oh my goodness gracious, that explains why our kids are acting like they're in grade 8 or 9 when they're under stress or duress. Also, if we take it down to, for instance, I joke, but it's true, the elementary teacher was tired of teaching for grade 3s who decides to go and teach grade 6. And all of a sudden now, it's like, oh my goodness, I feel like I'm back in early elementary school. We subtract 3 years. Why are young people in kindergarten and grade have shown up very different, if you will, than they did prior to the pandemic? But also, there are some things that occurred during the pandemic. So, as was noted in my bio, I have a very unique position because of working in 3 intersecting fields of threat assessment, trauma response, and family assessment, family dynamics. During the pandemic, we and my colleagues really focused a lot on the effects of quarantine. Now, I want to be very clear, this isn't me taking a position in relation to quarantining and whether it was necessary or not. The reality is that we quarantined. And we knew, those of us especially who are sort of purists in relation to human systems dynamics, knew that during quarantine, there was going to be some difficulties for some families. And part of it is actually based on this. When I was trained years ago, and by the way, I'm actually a graduate of Loma Linda University. I have a master's in marital and family therapy. I'm not Seventh-day Adventist, but it's a really darn good program. And I was trained in one dynamic that probably was brushed over in 5 minutes or less, called the closeness distance cycle. And I didn't provide any handouts or whatever it may be because I was too busy. But we'll probably provide a link if interested for some of the guidelines that we put out, including preparing for post-pandemic mental health, and this one on the closeness distance cycle, which is a family dynamic. The closeness distance cycle, simplistically put, is this. I don't care how much you love somebody, you can only be stuck together with them for so long before they start to get on your nerves. Would you guys agree? And so, even in the best of families during quarantine, a few folks had some anxiety moments. And another jingle for you. The higher the anxiety, the greater the symptom development. Well, the reality is, during the pandemic, no question about it, families whose pre-pandemic functioning was already somewhat impaired, if they were, for instance, on the cusp of abuse, i.e., a mother, a father, two parents, caregivers, who maybe one even decided they were about ready to leave this relationship, they just didn't tell their partner, and part of it was the anger building inside of them, then the pandemic comes along, they're forced into quarantining, but they still have the anger. We got some kids out there that we have inherited in schools, for instance, who first time ever have been witnesses to abuse behind closed doors, courtesy of quarantine. But we also have others who actually had already been exposed to abuse, off and on have been witnesses to it. And folks, quarantining was not going to make things better. All quarantining was going to do was intensify already existing dynamics. It was interesting, as I consulted with large hospitals and health regions across North America, I want to be very clear that one of the things that I said was, we're going to have to pay close attention to what is going to be our inheritance that is going to come out of this thing. Because first of all, when it came to kids, and I was interested, I had no intention of talking social media or its relevance to what we're dealing with. But courtesy of the conversations today, I want to be really, really succinct about this. We knew that kids, because of the impaired closeness distance cycle, where they were going to be compressed together with their families in some endangered situations, that the only way they're going to be able to lower the anxiety and survive is to create opportunities for distance, which happened by the kids staying up till 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning and immersing themselves in online behavior, while many parents and caregivers actually went to bed 2 hours earlier, got up 2 hours earlier, while many of the kids slept till 3, 4 o'clock in the afternoon and then repeated again. We know, interestingly, and I actually confess, I don't know your national statistics, but I'm sure somebody can look them up while I'm here, because you've all got iPhones just like the kiddies. But I will tell you that in Canada, as of the second year of the pandemic, we had an 88% increase in online sexual exploitation of young people. That is only the recorded cases. That does not include those who have not come forward. Well, when we start to look at all of that behavior, then we know that lots of kids got in over their heads and are bearing secrets. And I will tell you that one of the initiatives that we should really be looking at is, how do we communicate to parents, to caregivers? Because I'm telling you, when I say regression is the norm, subtract 3 years from the kids, I'm going to tell you that some of us in this room, we can subtract 30 years from us and discover that many adults did not behave as well as they thought they would behave behind closed doors either. And I say that because, in essence, and as a trained marital therapist also, never thought this would be so useful this far into my career. Oh, by the way, I've been really busy during the pandemic, considering how many impaired relationships there have been. But I will tell you that from a human dynamic perspective, none of us are half as mature as what we like to think we are. None of us, myself included. And if that statement pisses you off, you're immature. So the reality is, because of the weight actually that has been on many individuals during the pandemic, I'm here to tell you there are some parents who are weighed down and caregivers with guilt because they crossed some lines also. If we really want to look at, for instance, violence, gun violence, knife violence, for instance, we have made it very clear in the guidelines that we put out, if you will, for the world to have access to. We made it clear that we knew we were going to see, not only in our delayed response to the pandemic, but we were going to see a massive increase in weapons possession amongst young people, guns, knives, etc. One of the reasons why we knew that it would occur is, as I already said, all high-profile trauma does is intensify already existing dynamics in human systems. But also we knew that it would increase because the children know the truth. What that means is before they actually came back from quarantine the last time, surely you would concur, the kids knew who was threatening who online. They knew, by the way, who had the naked pics of a peer. They knew who either had already sent pics or was threatening to airdrop them to everyone inside of their school. Because the kids knew all of these things, then in the end, it's pretty simple. If the children, and I mean kids and adults, and adolescents, generally speaking, when it came to threat assessment cases, most of our time was spent dealing with high school kids and sometimes middle school kids. Coming out of the pandemic, we've never had more threat assessment cases with elementary age students than we've had currently. And by the way, more sexualized threat assessment cases than we have ever seen. And so we knew that weapons possession would be huge because in essence, the kids have a simple formula, whether they realize it or not. If children and adolescents feel that we, the adults, are either unable or unwilling to keep them safe, then the kids basically decide to arm themselves. And so that weight, of course, has come on the kids because they've entered knowing everything that has gone on. One of our jingles actually has been to say that we actually need to convince the kids that we can handle the truth, that we need to convince them that we understand what happened during the pandemic, and we also have to convince parents and caregivers also that we understand that it was a difficult time. By the way, that actually means less stone casting, if you will, and more actual genuine caring for what happened to the world and how it did intensify symptom development. Well, interestingly then, when we go and we take a look at our work around gun violence, just around violence in general, a simple standard is that serious violence is an evolutionary process no one just snaps. And that in actuality, it's often a painful evolutionary pathway for many individuals. But some folks have time to think, to fantasize, to build in justification. And then what happens often is the right set of circumstances occur that allows somebody to cross that line. But if we only look at gun violence or violence in general as if it is a mental health issue, then I will tell you, we have more than enough data. And, even the FBI actually did a really good job in a large meta study that they did in relation to mass shootings in America. And one of the things actually that doesn't seem to be fully understood by some, others do, is that the idea was that anybody who would take a gun and engage in a mass killing surely was struggling with major mental illness. But as a therapist, when I use that language, I'm referring to significant thought disorder, for instance, not, by the way, things like depression, anxiety, etc. And what became very clear in 400 plus mass shootings was that approximately 25% of those were carried out by individuals with major mental illness, where it was either diagnosed or could have been diagnosed. But that doesn't account for the other 75%, by the way, who painfully moved on that pathway of justification the way that we have described in our work. Interestingly enough, here, and credit to Los Angeles County, mental health, LAUSD, etc. First time I came here back in the day, for those who know some of the originals, Dr. Tony Belize was with LA County Mental Health, Dr. Marlene Wong was with LA Unified School District, and I did early trainings back then that were part of the foundation for the START program, for LA TARP and other things. And it's interesting, but from that early work, we recognize that in actuality, one of the most missing links in my early work was the role of undiagnosed or untreated trauma. Now, when I talk about, again, the whole idea of thought disorder versus, if you will, mental health struggles contributing to risk, there is no question about it, folks, that often in the majority of our moderate to high risk VTRA cases, so your name, threat assessment. But
Kevin, can I ask, yeah. We're going to go ahead and have the handheld work so we don't have Cuco.
Oh yeah, sorry, I can do this thing here. There you go.
We turn that on?
Yeah, it is on. All right.
Okay.
Oh, I'm good.
Oh, he's going to get the handheld to work. So that way.
All right. Sorry about that.
My finger was starting to hurt watching you.
Well, I'm glad you did that because I was going to have to hold it for 20 minutes for my colleague here too. So thank you. So for my last 3 minutes, let me just say, is that when we look at even gun violence or violence and its link to mental health issues, there is a difference, if you will, from thought disorder, which, by the way, is misrepresented by many people as a primary cause, versus individuals who are in emotional pain, including undiagnosed, untreated trauma, that often leads them in distress to eventually consider two potential pathways: one violence, one suicide, or a combination of both. And I'll conclude just very simply, and some of my colleagues who are on the panel will no doubt fill in some of the blanks. I'll say that in the work of violence threat risk assessment and trauma response, three primary hypotheses when people come to our attention, because most people who engage in major acts of violence do give us pre-incident signs and indicators, as subtle as they may be sometimes. If folks are trained, we can see it coming. We can't prevent everything, but we can prevent the most. But three primary hypotheses that guide our work. First hypothesis: many people engage in threat-making, threat-related prior to, as a conscious or unconscious cry for help, is the first hypothesis in our work. Second primary hypothesis is conspiracy of two or more, and that needs to be further discussed, because often one individual may pull the trigger, but there is often a puppet master in the background, adding to the justification process, building their anger, if you will, and then they end up being the one engaging in the act of violence, and we miss the one in the background who often move them to it. We see this in our policing, if you will, cases all the time. And the third hypothesis: is it possible this person who made a threat is actually more suicidal than homicidal? And that, without a doubt, occurs with many types of individuals. And then what we're dealing with in this generation is that sometimes people in emotional pain decide, if I'm going to kill myself, the suicidality, then if I'm going to kill myself, maybe I should go out with a bang. And then often we see, if you will, that played out in a dramatic fashion. But I'll conclude and say 10 people can engage in the exact same act of violence, but for 10 different reasons. And 10 other people can be exposed to the same traumatic stimuli and have 10 completely different responses to it. And so assessment, and multi-departmental collaboration and plans is one of the amazing ways that we can engage in good violence prevention and trauma response. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Next, we have Jose Osuna. Jose wears many hats, but in all of them, he uses his voice to speak for those who have experienced incarceration. He began his career at Homeboy Industries, the largest gang rehabilitation program, entering as a participant and ending up as the Director of External Affairs. Currently, he is the Housing Justice Manager for Brilliant Corners, a statewide housing organization that focuses on developing permanent supportive housing for many types of special needs communities. Jose is also a member of the LA County Public Safety Realignment Team, a member of the Long Beach City Prosecutors Multicultural Advisory Commission, and the lead coordinator for the Long Beach Coalition for Safety and Justice. Jose's passion for this area comes from his lived experience with firearm violence and incarceration, which he'll tell us more about today. Jose, thank you so much for being here with us. We're ready to hear your presentation. Please. Whichever one, right, the other one, because that one is on.
All right, can you hear me?
We can. Thank you.
Thank you for that introduction. And I want to thank the commission for inviting me to share a little bit about, what I've been able to live through and how that has now turned into a really great professional journey for myself. I want to, since you rattled off, my 20 different hats that I wear professionally, I wanted to start off by talking a little bit about my lived experience. We're here to talk about gun violence and it's the connective tissue that it has with mental health. And so I want to let this commission know that I'm both a survivor of gun violence. I've been shot myself on 3 separate occasions. And I'm also a survivor of a great loss. I lost my 17-year-old son to gun violence a little over 15 years ago. It'll be 16 years in August. But for many, many years, unfortunately, from the age of approximately 10 years old to the age of 35, I was a perpetrator of gun violence. I was a member of a very violent street gang in the city of Long Beach for most of my young life and some of my adult life. Fortunately, that isn't the case anymore, but I come to this commission carrying, both sides of that experience. And what I can say is this, that mental health and addressing my mental health issues, my needs, has really been the pivot for transformation, right? Transformation of the way that I saw myself and I saw the world and my place in it, and a transformation in how to deal with different situations. Unfortunately, I discovered mental health help through losing my son. When my son was killed, unfortunately, there was no team of therapists or mental health professionals that arrived at my home the morning after my son was murdered in front of my home. Unfortunately, what happened for me is that, 50 members of law enforcement showed up at my house and pulled my family outside of our house in order to search my residence in fear of some type of retaliation. And probably justifiably so. I'm not going to say that they weren't justified in feeling that way. I was a very active gang member. I perpetrated a lot of violence, as I said. And, because I had been incarcerated for 13 years of my life at that point, I was very high up on the food chain in the gang world. And so law enforcement was justifiably concerned. But I think that if that was coupled with the mental health needs that my family had at the moment, things might have been different, right? The anger and the grief that I felt probably would have been mitigated as opposed to being aggravated, right? And I'm not proud to say this, but as a result of my son's killing, there was a very sharp uptick in gang violence in that part of the city. My son was not a gang member. He just happened to be my son sitting in front of my house when men came looking for me, and they found him instead. But he was very well known, very well loved in the community. And unfortunately, that overflowed into the gang community as well. So there was a lot of conflict after my son's death. I did not do anything to mitigate that violence because, as I said, all I know is that law enforcement responded the way they did, and that was their job. They were doing their job. But other parts of the system didn't work, right? Those parts that are there are supposed to be there to help a family like mine through this traumatic event. It took a long time for me to get to a point where I was able to receive mental health services. And, there have been some policy changes that have changed that circumstance now, but Unfortunately, my son was documented as a gang member one day because he was riding in the car with another documented gang member, which happened to be his father. So I was driving my son to school, and law enforcement stopped me. They already had me documented as a gang member, and they said, we're gonna go ahead and document your son as a gang member, even though he wasn't. This disqualified my family from receiving compensation, victims' right compensation. That policy has changed now, right? But at that time, we were not able to receive any counseling, any mental health help because he was disqualified. He was a documented gang member on paper, and it took an appeal process, right? Like I actually had to work with the Long Beach City prosecutor, and that's how our paths initially crossed. I now serve on a commission for Doug Halbert, but that's how our paths crossed. I had to go to the Long Beach City prosecutor and appeal that and get my son's name pulled from the gang database so that we could then qualify for the services for victims. And I started to receive therapy, and it changed my life. Through therapy, I started to really look at all of the trauma, and I'm glad that you brought up trauma, Kevin. I have a jingle too. My jingle is causing trauma causes trauma, right? So for me, some of the greatest trauma that I have endured and have had to live with and deal with is the trauma that happened to me when I inflicted violence upon other human beings. I didn't understand how traumatic that could be until I had moments to reflect, until I was able to sit down with a mental health professional and talk about how impacted I was by hurting other human beings and how I was still carrying around a lot of that trauma. That journey began for me when I started to receive, grief counseling with a mental health professional, with a therapist. This mental health professional also pointed out some other things that were going on with me. My substance abuse and how that skewed my judgment, how it made things like committing violence easier when you're numb under the influence of a substance. So he helped me to start to address those things, and my life really started to change. And so, I ended up wanting to change my life. And that's when I found my way to Homeboy Industries. A lot of you here, especially from the Los Angeles area, I'm sure are familiar with Father Greg's organization. I really was surprised when I walked through the doors and they started talking to me about things. And one of the things they mentioned that they had was their own mental health department. And so that's where I really like to look at culturally competent approaches to mental health, right? Like everybody's need is not the same. For a lot of times, there was this negative connotation around mental health and folks that live, those type of lifestyles, the gang lifestyle, right? At Homeboy Industries, they tend to really shatter that preconceived notion that gangsters don't need mental health help. And so, I started to go to therapy there as well. One of the things that really, tripped me out when I was at Homeboy was the very unique approaches that their therapists take to dealing with gang members that are carrying a lot of different trauma. Like I said, both trauma that was caused upon them, that was inflicted upon them, but also carrying the trauma of all the things that they've done in order to survive, in order to raise up in the gang world, all the different things and reasons that we commit violence and end up carrying that trauma. I walked by and they do tours there, so I can talk a little bit. So Father Greg had me, be one of the main tour guides there at Homeboy. And I was walking alongside the mental health offices one day, and I saw that in one of the offices, there was a homegirl, and she was asleep on the couch. And the therapist was doing her emails or whatever she was on her computer. And I kind of tripped out, what's going on here? And I just did finish the tour, and then I went back and I asked her, hey, that didn't look very good. People, why are you just letting her sleep? And she told me, she goes, well, this is the only place she can't sleep. She lives in a home that doesn't allow her to sleep. They're doing drugs at all times of the day and night. there's violence happening outside of her home, this is the only place where she can actually get some rest. So if that's not therapeutic, I don't know what to tell you, right? And so like I started to really take an interest in their unique approaches. I was able to participate in a process called VOGE, Victim Offender Education Group, where we were actually able to bring together perpetrators of crimes and their victims to hopefully find some closure and some resolution for all parties involved in very violent crimes, you know, sex crimes, homicides, you know, attempted homicides, things like that. And I found that it was very therapeutic for people to like find closure, find resolution, to face that person that had harmed them and be able to ask them why. And also to be able to hear the real whys, you know. So I ended up taking this journey at Homeboy for, you know, almost 10 years that I was there with Father Greg. Ended up becoming their director of external affairs and handling all of their government relationships. You know, and then I moved on from the organization. I got to meet a lot of great people along the way. So I ended up really now building a career out of dealing with, you know, government officials, politicians, a lot of different folks. And my life is so very different than it was when I first decided to change it. But the one constant thing that I've had to keep addressing is my mental health. Because as a professional, I went from service recipient to service provider. And, you know, there's this thing they call stewardship of trauma, where you deal with people that are carrying trauma, that you end up carrying some of their trauma for them at times. And so it's been a constant thing for myself to keep my mental health up. And how does this all connect to gun violence, right? As I said at the very beginning, I was a perpetrator of gun violence. From the moment I started to receive mental health services, picking up a gun has never been an option in my head to react to anything that has happened in my life, right? And prior to that, it was always the first instinct. If someone hurt me, I was gonna go pick up a gun. I didn't like knives or fighting, I like guns. That's the way I was. I was gonna go pick up a gun and I was gonna go commit violence against another human being. If someone hurt someone that I loved, I was gonna go pick up a gun and hurt somebody. And there were many times where like I would look at my life and see how in shambles it was during the worst moments, where a gun and staring at it through the wrong side was a real option for me, right? Where I felt like I'd be better off dead. How can I ever get out of this hole that I'm in, you know? But ever since I really started to address my mental health, ever since that was available to me, I haven't had that thought to harm another human being with a gun, to harm myself with a gun. So I'm a real proponent in understanding the mental health needs of all of our community. You know, I think when we talk about gang members, you know, I have a very narrow like perspective and kind of expertise, and it's really centered around gang members for me, right? But that was what I also got to witness at Homeboy Industries when I was there, is that when folks were able to start to deal with their mental health issues, violence became less of a viable option to them. When they were offered other resources, you know, violence became less of an option for them. You know, I think that when we look at gang members in a way that is very similar, and this may come off the wall, and I mean no disrespect by it, but when I was at Homeboy, I got to work a lot with LAPD. I got to work a lot with their training academy. They would come over to Homeboy and receive training sessions from gang members. And I remember a senior officer brought a class in at one point, and I asked this officer, "What's the first thing you think about when you leave your house in the morning?" He said, I just want to get home safe tonight to my family. And I said, most gang members, that's the first thing they think about when they leave their house too. There's a parallel there, and I think that we need to look at that as well. Whether it's a lifestyle, whether it's a job, because I'm also concerned with members of law enforcement and their mental health needs, and how we expect them to be like these men and women and people of steel and not be impacted by the trauma that they have to witness and sometimes inflict, right? Like that leads to gun violence as well. When you have to be hyper vigilant, when large pockets of the community demonize you, right? Like that's an experience that I trip out that law enforcement and gang members share now. There are large pockets of community that demonize members of law enforcement. Large pockets of the community demonize gang members. When you got to live with that, it definitely becomes a mental health issue. And your reaction to things and to people and to situations can be very skewed. And so I think that's one of the things that we also have to look at as we look at this intersection between gun violence and mental health. Just to close, I really liked when you talked about undiagnosed and untreated trauma. I think for me, that's like one of the core pieces that I'm going to take away from what Kevin talked about is how many folks are walking around with undiagnosed and untreated trauma, and how are they going to react to that trauma in any given situation, right? If we really start to look at that piece, I think that we can make a difference. So I hope that my rambling is helpful in some kind of way, that you take something away from, you know, the things that I've been able to learn along the way, both personally and professionally. And thank you for your time.
Jose, thank you so much. Thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for being here. We appreciate everything you had to say. If you could stick around, because we're gonna go to our next panelist, but we'll have questions for you at the end. Our third presenter is Refujio. Did I say your name right? Correct me if I didn't. No. Rodriguez.
Cuco's a lot easier.
What is it?
Cuco.
Cuco, okay. Our third presenter is Cuco, who's currently the Chief Equity and Program Officer at the Hope and Heal Fund, a nonprofit organization dedicated to addressing firearm violence and promoting healing and recovery. Prior to his current role, Cuco worked as MHSA coordinator in Santa Barbara County. So he's familiar with the work we do here at the Commission. Cuco's career has been driven by his passion for racial equity, community engagement, youth violence, and gang intervention. We're so excited to have you here, and we're ready for your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be back, and it's great to be here and not have to seek approval for a plan. I was the MHSA Division Chief for Santa Barbara County and the Chief Equity Officer from 2005 to 2016, 2017. And so I'm very familiar with this work. Then I decided to go to work in philanthropy. Prior to that, I worked in the nonprofit sector, doing work, working with incarcerated populations in Santa Barbara County, looking at issues of particularly gang violence in Santa Barbara County. Before that, I was an engineer in my prior career. And yes, it's all systems. I'm going to talk about that. I don't have jingles. I have math. I use equations. It's all math to me. But prior to that, and I think this is important in terms of credentials, is that I was a recipient of care. I received services, and if it weren't for those services, you wouldn't be getting this version of me. This is the better version of me. I would have still been a leader and done things in my community. It's just not, you know, like Jose described, probably in a very destructive way. But because I was a recipient of care and services, and I had a great family, and I had the support and the resources that I needed, what you get is a better version of me. Also share with you, you know, my parents are immigrants from Mexico. I grew up as a farm worker. The ideal for me, I thought when I graduated, was to be an engineer, and I had an option to be an artist or to be an engineer, and I decided that where the money was engineering. And I graduated, and I did that for a while, and it was very unfulfilling, and I was very miserable. And so when you set your sights on such things and you think that you're going to receive like there's a benefit and it doesn't, it's still trauma. Like you figure out like, what the heck? Like this is the American dream that we are told. And I started doing nonprofit work, thinking it was going to be me giving back to the community for a little bit. And 30 years later, I'm still here. So I think that's important to state because those are the lenses by which I look at the work that we do. It should suffice in any forum that I go to speak, it should suffice for me to just say that the leading cause of death for 0 to 19-year-olds in this country is gun violence. And I should be able to drop my mic and walk away, and that should be the impetus for why we do this work. That is especially so if you happen to be a Black male or a Latino male in this country. That in of itself, whether it's a homicide or suicide, should be sufficient reason for us to prioritize this issue. Despite that, I'll talk about a few other things. But that, I want to say that because that is a huge imperative that we must address in our country, that only we deal with in this country. In terms of the work that I do, the Hope and Heal Fund was created after the San Bernardino shooting. A lot of the foundations here in California realized that there really wasn't a fund or a foundation that specialized in gun violence work outside of policy. And so they created the Hope and Heal Fund. We're not that old, we're not that large. Our focus is we are an equity fund. So equity is very central to our work and always has been. We look at the intersection of gun violence prevention, systems change, and equity. That's the area that we work in. And what that means is really typically that a lot of the work that we deal with is not work that other folks are doing. We certainly want to elevate, want to support, but we want to look at the areas. Like I said, I'm very much an engineer. I like taking stuff apart, putting it back together. And sometimes if you've had extra parts and you didn't need those extra parts. So that's my perspective. But I'm the person that throws stuff on the wall. I'm the R&D person. And that's kind of what we do. We're not regular traditional philanthropy. We really are non-traditional, and we try to work in that space. And what that means in practical terms, I'll give you an example. There's a lot of our partners that do national work and policy, focus on gun violence. And I tell people, if you removed every gun from this country and you removed access, and again, I'm not advocating that, it's just a scenario, would you call that a win? And a lot of our partners say yes, and we close up shop and go home. I said, yeah. I said, and in our work, we're not done yet. Because our work around equity and our work around communities and our work around healing is not just the access. Certainly the access is important, but who's going to address the mentality that makes somebody believe that it's okay to take a life because I disagree with you? That's where our work is centered. And that's the work that's very difficult, and that's the work that's not being done. And so we try to look at it from that way. We really focus on homicides and suicides. Clearly here, we are the Oversight and Accountability Commission. Suicides is a huge part in terms of access. My equation is you have untreated mental health or trauma, alcohol and drug use, a precipitating event, or as you said, something that escalates and now exacerbates everything. That in of itself creates crisis. Add to that access to weapons, and now you increase lethality. And despite that, most of our mental health system, in the upfront risk assessment, before decompensation, we ask all sorts of intrusive questions about sexuality, drug use, all these things, when we really should be asking, so do you own a gun? Does anybody in your house own guns? One of the areas that I said was we do systems change. That's a systems analysis in something that is not expensive when you look at the system and the analysis, which are the critical control points that we can move that can significantly move the needle on some of the conversations. Not very expensive to add a question, a lot of resistance. But we feel that when you do these types of systems analysis, you can considerably shift the impact. So again, for us, a lot of our strategies are around systems change. We also do some capacity building in terms of supporting small organizations. We don't have a lot of money to sustain ongoing funding, but what we do have is funding for organizations that are focused in doing this work around gun violence to say, you know, there's a huge grant with public dollars. It's either at the county or at the state level. We'd love to give you $10,000 to hire a grant writer to help your partnership leverage those funds. So we're trying to be strategic in how we use our dollars with some of our local partners so that they can leverage public dollars. So that's kind of a lot of or other areas of capacity building in unrestricted funds. Having worked in the nonprofit sector, sometimes you can create great budgets, but they're all programmatic and they're all earmarked, just like a lot of mental health dollars. I was a mental health provider before this. It's very hard to increase your capacity, to train people, to do a lot of the mental health capacity building, all these other things that we do, we have evaluation, all of these things. So that's what we try to invest strategically in unrestricted areas so that these organizations can build their capacity, increase their capacity around the work. In terms of system strategies, some of the other systems work, just to be aware, is we are currently engaged in an effort to do GIS mapping. We have mapped every single homicide for the last 9 years in the state of California to the street. That's the initial layer that we have. The reason we did that is to create a real visual for people, have them understand that over 2/3 of total homicides in the state of California, gun homicides, are not in urban centers. They're in Lompoc, in Santa Maria, Ano, in Modesto. They're in the suburbs of LA. And yes, urban centers do have high rates, but 2/3 of total homicides in the state of California are not in urban centers. And the next layer, again, to be clear, and the reason I share this because I think it has some bearing in terms of the conversation here, the next 2 layers that we're working on GIS mapping in terms of actual data to help support the work and the interventions that we're doing is looking at a layer that augments the number of suicides in communities so that we look at total gun deaths in one place and understand the total impact of guns in a community in terms of suicides and in terms of homicides. We separate them out. The equation that exists or the math that exists for us in this work is that typically 1 out of every 2 gun deaths is a suicide. So in most communities, that's what you're going to see. Now, in California, highest risk population, veterans, older white males who are lifetime gun owners, right? So depending, again, but we're trying to source that information out so that we have an actual assessment of the impact of gun violence in communities in terms of homicides and suicides. And I think that's important. The other final piece I'll say in terms of homicides, it's really, really critical, really important, because I think it goes with some of the data that you're discussing. That's important. And we should focus more efforts on collecting some of this data because I think it's helpful in providing some clarity around narratives and what is going on in many communities is that when we're looking at homicides, the other layer that we're trying to identify is out of those total homicides, gun-related homicides, how many of them were intimate partner and how many were street violence? Because after COVID, just anecdotally, I can tell you that we've seen increases in both. But I think that we've seen significant increases in homicides in terms of intimate partner violence. And that is not information that's readily available. We're trying to decipher that, disaggregate that, because it's very critical, very important in some communities. And it speaks not only to mental health, it speaks to trauma, it speaks to a lot of other things. Spoke a little bit about the mental health system. We're also, very involved in working in systems and county systems and making correlations. As an engineer, I tell people, systems work. If not, they don't exist. Like, you may not like it. As a person of color, I as an activist, I was taught to dislike certain systems because they didn't work for me. But they're working for somebody. And I'll tell you, after working 11 years in the county, I can go back and everything's still there. They didn't miss Cuco. It's still going. Like, there's 2 people doing my job. Well, actually 3 people doing my job, but okay, it's a different issue. But it still rolls. And so when you do a systems analysis is, what is working in that system and how can we apply that process to this? And see, in the county, and when I worked in Santa Barbara, whenever there was a fire, we have a command center in terms of emergency operations. And a lot of us got deployed. Everybody knew their tasks. Everything was laid out. And so we're trying to create, and I think, we actually spoke with Sheriff Brown and others, trying to create a parallel and saying, wouldn't it be a good idea to look at an existing strategy that works? Because fire, no one has died in Santa Barbara because of a fire in like 30 years. It's effective. And if I go back today, if there was a crisis, it would be the same as it was 5 years ago with some improvements, I'm sure. We don't have that in terms of a mass shooting. More importantly, from an equity standpoint, let's be clear. We developed a plan in Santa Barbara and other counties to ensure that 2% of the population that lives on the most expensive real estate in the country don't die. And yet in Santa Barbara County, no less than 23 people die of gun violence every year in the last 10 years. It hasn't dipped below 23. I'm not saying we shouldn't have an emergency operations plan for fire, but I'm saying is that in order for us to have equity, we should create something similar that's working to ensure other people don't die. So our analysis and our approach is that's the type of work that we're doing. The last thing that I'll share with you is the other areas that we're looking at to focus on in terms of supporting is looking at cost-benefit analysis that correlate with equity, but correlate with gun violence that we're not doing right now. And from an equity standpoint, that's really important. Just like we do in mental health. It's taken us a very long time to say, look, we need to invest in prevention because it's more expensive to continue to hospitalize people. And it took us a long time to put a number to that. It's expensive to have homicides in your community. In terms of investigation, hospitalization, prosecution, just those three things. It's expensive. It's a worthwhile investment to ensure nobody dies. This doesn't take into account the economic impact it has, the devaluation of homes, or the impact on your businesses, all of those things. So we're trying to create a very different way and a different formula by which we can look at this to ensure that we're investing on front-end prevention work to ensure that not only people don't die, but to also ensure that our investments, I mean, my thing is, look, if it's working, great, continue to do that. But if it's not, why are we doing this? That's our role. The last thing I'll close with is in a few minutes is that ultimately, I think what defines our organization and the work that we're hoping communities look at is there's a story of four sisters who come up on a river and there's children drowning. And the first sister runs in and she grabs one child and starts pulling them out, but it's not enough. The second sister realizes that if she grabs one child and asks them to grab another child or another one, she might be able to pull two or three. The third sister realizes that, oh, there's a lot of children getting past, so she goes downstream and figures she might be able to get them on this bridge. They start looking at the fourth sister and they say, what are you doing? As she starts walking upstream, she said, you know, we should probably try to figure out why children are falling into the river. Our hope for communities is that they view gun violence and a lot of the intervention work and a lot of the issues, social issues that are going on, mental health, all of these things in that way. Without those four components, this is not sustainable. And so I'll end with that and I'll give you back about 4 minutes.
Thank you so much. We'll save our question for you, Dan. Next presentation. Great, this isn't working. Next, we have a presentation from Dr. Sarah Metz. Dr. Metz is director of the UCSF Trauma Recovery Center and a professor in the Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences, as well as the chief psychologist for San Francisco General Hospital. Dr. Metz has extensive experience working with trauma survivors, substance use disorders, combat veteran survivors, and perpetrators of violence, and those with complex PTSD. She's a renowned expert in trauma and recovery, and we're so happy to have her joining us remotely to present today. Dr. Metz, we're ready for you.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys, and I'm really sorry that I can't be there in person. I have 2 young kiddos at home, so it makes traveling a little bit difficult. I just wanted to say thank you so much for inviting me to be part of this panel. It's just been incredible to hear everybody's contributions. I have a presentation. I'm a visual person to kind of help keep me on track. So I'm gonna share my screen here in a second. I think everybody can see that, yeah? And please let me know if my sound goes wonky or I lose you on the presentation. So I'll back up for a second. So as I mentioned, I'm the director for the UCSF Trauma Recovery Center. So what we do is treat survivors of interpersonal violence. And I'll go into much more detail in terms of what we do exactly, but just to give a little more context before I start. So this quote, "We can sew them up, but we can't make them well." This is really what started it all for the Trauma Recovery Center. So this was Dr. Bill Schechter, who was the chief of surgery back in 1997 over at San Francisco General Hospital. And by the way, San Francisco General Hospital is the only level 1 trauma hospital here in San Francisco. So that's where any, significant, like where shootings go, significant physical assaults, they come to our hospital. And he was talking with the founder of the Trauma Recovery Center, Dr. Alicia Basaleri, and that really prompted her to figure out kind of a gap in care, a gap in mental health care for survivors of violence, and wanting to ensure that they have access to high quality care and support to help them heal. And so our vision here is a community that heals the wounds of violence and embraces hope for a nonviolent and compassionate world. And our Trauma Recovery Center, we have a number of programs housed within our clinic. That includes the Rape Treatment Center. So San Francisco General Hospital is the only hospital where folks can go following an acute sexual assault for forensic evidence collection. We also have what we call the Neurotrauma Outreach Program, where we serve folks who have an acquired traumatic brain injury. The majority of those brain injuries are occurring in the context of a crime for our community of clients here. Others are just day-to-day life. They got drunk, rode their bike, fell off, hit their head, and ended up over at San Francisco General. We also work really closely with the Wraparound Project, which is a hospital-based violence intervention program over at San Francisco General. And we have a clinician here at the Trauma Recovery Center we call the Bridge Physician that works very intimately with Wraparound to identify clients that might benefit from mental health services, as well, as kind of being a mental health consultant for the team. And then we also serve through a program called Survivors International, asylees, asylum seekers, and refugees who experience persecution in their home country. And so just to give you a little bit of a sense of the types of crime that we serve here at the Trauma Recovery Center, and this is based on our data since 2001, you can see that we certainly have a large proportion of sexual assault survivors because we have the Rape Treatment Center. And shootings are pretty consistently about 6% of the clients that we see here. And then I also want to highlight the family of a victim. So these are derivative victims, predominantly of folks that have lost somebody to homicide, and that can include by police. And so to give you a little idea of the demographics, this is specifically for our gunshot survivors between 2018 and 2022. You can see overwhelmingly they're men, they're Black and Latino men, and they're in the age group of about 21 to 30. And so the TRC is actually, our model of care has been codified into legislation here in California. Our model of care is based on a randomized clinical trial where we evaluated our method, of supporting survivors of crime. So somebody was kind of talking earlier about, identifying gaps. So what's missing? So there was a lot of funding for certain types of crime survivors, specifically domestic violence and sexual assault. But there wasn't a lot of resources being put into physical assault, stabbings, gunshot survivors. And so we really wanted to make sure that our model of care wasn't just limited or focused to one type of crime survivor. And we do a lot of assertive outreach and engagement with underserved population. So we wanted to ensure that we were doing our best to reduce barriers for folks to even being able to access care. And we do comprehensive mental health and support services, and I'll go into a little bit more about what that looks like. And also just to circle back, sorry, to the assertive outreach piece, we go into the community. We will go into homeless encampments. We will provide services at people's homes. We do bedsides over at the hospital, really just wanting to folks to learn that we're here. So I think, Jose mentioned earlier, with the tragic loss of his son, nobody let him know what was available to him, and we do not want that to be the experience of survivors in our community. We're a multidisciplinary team. We have master's level clinicians, psychologists, psychiatrists, MFTs, and social workers. So we have a wide variety of disciplines. All are welcome. So insurance status doesn't matter. Immigration status doesn't matter. All of our services are free. We provide really comprehensive clinical case management. So sometimes in mental health, folks just think, okay, it's talk therapy. If I talk to you and I give you enough tools, that's enough. But I think Jose also mentioned, and I'm sorry to keep referencing you, but you just offered such powerful and rich personal experience and context to what we do. But we'll go to doctor's appointments with folks. We will help folks get connected to primary care, get connected to insurance, apply for that victim compensation entitlement, assisting them to avoid getting kicked out of their housing, to help them avoid getting kicked out of school or, losing their job. So being inclusive for clients facing complex issues. So not saying, no, somebody can't come into care because they're presenting like somebody who's experienced trauma. So that means if they're angry, if they're irritable, if they are high on drugs, that's not a reason for them not to be able to access services with us, that we very much understand all the different ways that trauma can present itself. And as a matter of fact, for the clients that are seeking our services, on average, they experienced 4 prior traumatic experiences before they're referring crime. So a lot of our clients struggle with complex PTSD. We use trauma-informed, evidence-based practices. And this is because we want to ensure that underserved communities are getting access to state-of-the-art treatments. I think a lot of folks have really, really wonderful intentions and provide supportive therapy. And there's other options. And, we also recognize, too, that what we do here at the Trauma Recovery Center might not be the best fit for everybody. But we really do very hard to also learn treatments that are culturally adapted to the various communities that we serve. As you saw, we treat an international population, and so we have to be very flexible with the types of treatments that we offer. We want it to be in alignment with their belief systems and their values, that it really can be helpful. We're also goal-driven, so we co-create with our clients a plan of care. What do they see as their primary areas of need? And if it's not, jumping into trauma therapy, that's okay. So for example, folks can just come to us for case management support, and that's okay. And oftentimes that is what jumpstarts the healing for folks after being victimized. And then also being accountable services. So we are data-driven, meaning we do assessment. So we do a very thorough assessment up front to really understand all of the ways that trauma has impacted somebody's life, as well as potential other, mental health needs that they might have, whether it's depression, anxiety, substance use, physical pain, sleep difficulties. And we evaluate that, their symptom experience, every 8 weeks, so that we can, if we need to shift course, mid-treatment because what we're doing isn't targeting their needs, we know that and we're not just guessing. So as I said, we do a lot of different stuff, really depending on each client's needs. So For the Rape Treatment Center during business hours, our mental health providers respond to the emergency department to provide psychological first aid for acute sexual assault survivors. We do bedside referrals, support, and if needed, treatment. So our bridge position, for example, that works with the Wraparound Project, will go into the emergency department, will go into the ICU with Wraparound to talk to gunshot survivors and their families about the services that we provide so that they know that we're there, you know, assisting with any immediate case management needs that they might have. Any sexual assault survivor that comes to the emergency department is automatically scheduled for a follow-up with us so that they have that space, you know, if they want it. I already mentioned our comprehensive assessment that we do, very comprehensive clinical case management, as I said. So that can include accompanying folks to the police station if they want to make a police report, or coordinating with our local police departments to have somebody actually come here on site to support survivors making police reports if they want to. I already talked a bit about the treatment. We do also offer groups and some limited family work, as well as in-house psychiatry. So we are a short-term treatment model. So we, on average, do about 16 sessions, but we, of course, can increase that if needed. And so just between intake and session 16, we see very significant improvements in things like PTSD and depression. So to explain this chart that you're looking at, that blue dotted line, the 33.6, is actually the cutoff when using the PCL-5 for likely PTSD. You can see that our clients are coming in well above that threshold at 47.1. And just in those 16 sessions, we're seeing a 44% reduction in their PTSD symptomatology. Similar for depression, so that red line is the threshold for suspected depression. And again, our clients are coming in well above that at 14.4. And just in those 16 sessions, we're seeing a 45% reduction in their depression symptoms. All right, so I thought I would just take a few minutes to walk through a case example so you can kind of see, you know, maybe a before or after. So before crime victimization in some respects, and then kind of the impact. And what I really would like to invite folks to hold is just kind of thinking about the ripple effect that I'm, you know, attempting to convey here. You know, that the impact isn't just the direct survivor, right? There's reverberations, you know, for their immediate family, for their community and beyond. You know, as well as just kind of looking at risk factors that can, you know, just increase, you know, somebody's potential for being exposed to trauma, and just what that can look like. And just please rest assured, there's no HIPAA violations here. This is a conglomeration of multiple case examples, and this picture is not of a real client of ours. So I want to introduce you to Samuel, and he's a 22-year-old cisgender male born and raised in San Francisco. He has an older sister and younger brother, and he has a 3-year-old child. And prior to victimization, he was working at a fast food restaurant and taking community college classes, and he was stably housed with a family friend. He grew up in a single-parent home in a high-crime neighborhood in San Francisco, where he witnessed domestic violence and was physically and emotionally abused. And Samuel witnessed his uncle get shot and killed at the age of 10. If you think about ACEs, right, he already has quite a number of those. So this is just to give a little snapshot of the incident itself. So the last thing that Samuel remembers is that he was walking home from work. The next thing that he recalls is he woke up in the ICU at San Francisco General. He was told he'd been shot 3 times and he required emergency surgery. He was informed that he coded during surgery and that he's not done. He requires further surgeries to repair all of the damage. He ended up remaining in the hospital for 4 months while having 3 subsequent surgeries. The suspects were never apprehended. So Samuel ended up losing his job immediately when he was finally able to call his employer to inform them of his hospitalization. He soon thereafter lost his housing as he had no savings to pay for rent since he couldn't work, and his belongings were eventually given away. So in a matter of 4 months, this young man that was independent, that was stably housed, that was employed, that was going to school, that was taking care of his child, literally lost everything. So just to give a little example of what happens when folks are inpatient at the hospital as a result of gun violence. So he was visited at bedside by a case manager from the Wraparound Project and our TRC Bridge clinician. He was informed about the services that our multidisciplinary team could provide, and we provided him with some psychoeducation about trauma symptoms and recommendations for immediate coping. While he was grateful for the connection, he decided that this wasn't the right time for him to get into mental health services. He really wanted to focus on his physical health and healing and prioritizing getting a job to pay for his child support and his housing. So after 4 months, he was released from the hospital, and he was able to couch surf with some friends and family for a few months while he continued to recuperate. However, eventually he was asked to leave because he couldn't contribute financially. He then found himself living on the streets, unemployed, and still healing from injuries with still one more surgery on the horizon. To assist in pain management, Samuel was prescribed opiates, and he began to take more than prescribed as a means to cope with all of his daily stress and pain. It wasn't long before alcohol came on board. This was a source of comfort as well as warmth, and he was soon arrested for drunken disorderly and held in booking for 3 days where he was physically assaulted and ended up sustaining a mild TBI. At this point, he was once again sent to San Francisco General, where he was once again referred to the Trauma Recovery Center from the neurosurgical unit. This time around, he accepted our referral. So his TRC clinician met him at the hospital bedside and completed his initial intake evaluation. At that time, he was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, major depressive disorder, opiate use disorder, and alcohol use disorder. And we provided him with quite a bit of clinical case management. So we helped him to complete his victim of crime compensation application. We helped him to access short-term disability, to locate transitional youth, temporary housing. We helped to coordinate the care, his medical care with his PCP. Because of his TBI, he needed speech therapy and occupational therapy. We assisted him in scheduling and planning for his final surgery. We referred him back to the Wraparound Project. We also referred him, we have a TBI support group here. And we accompanied him to his community college to assist him in advocating so that he wouldn't lose the progress that he made in completing his coursework. Concurrent with doing all of this with Samuel, he was receiving individual trauma-focused psychotherapy. He was in a skills-based group. It's called Skills Training in Affective and Interpersonal Regulation, which is specifically geared for folks who have a complex trauma history. And he also received EMDR, or eye movement desensitization and reprocessing therapy. And so despite him receiving all of that support, the reality is that Samuel has a long road ahead of him. He has medical bills looming in the background. He now has to figure out how to accommodate the impact of the traumatic brain injury on his functioning. He hasn't been able to see or spend time with his child because of his hospitalization, houselessness, and subsequent hospitalization. Because of all of this, he fell behind on child support, which impacts the types of resources that his child has access to. He still doesn't have permanent housing, and he's still unemployed. And so just want to go back, to this, that, again, just reflecting on where Samuel was before the shooting, right? He didn't have any of this, shouldering with any of this or having to figure out how to navigate now really complex systems of care, complex systems of accessing entitlements. He was living his life. And so want to talk just for a little bit. The Alliance for Safety and Justice is a national alliance that works to help with things like legislative efforts for victims of crime. And in 2022, they did a national survey of crime victims. And so just wanted to share a little bit of what they learned through that. And their survey was of 1,537 survivors of crime or violence. So not all the crime survivors are of violent crime. And more than 6 out of 10 were a victim in the last 10 years, and almost half were victims of violent crime. And crime victims are more likely to be young, BIPOC, low income, LGBTQ, disabled, and have prior records. And the one piece that I really also want to kind of drive home is that once you're the victim of a crime, you're 3 times as likely to be victims again of 4 or more crimes. So when you think about the impact that that shooting had on Sam, that's one crime event, right? And so just having that compounded over time, and then in addition, you know, depending on the type of crime that folks are experiencing, you know, even just the physical impact, you know, of those crimes and injuries that it has on their functioning. 74% of crime survivors did not receive mental health support, despite at least 70% of them reporting at least one trauma symptom. And 96% did not receive victim compensation to which they were entitled. So one thing to highlight, I mentioned earlier that the TRC model of care is codified into legislation here in California, but it is also now being replicated across the country. So we are working really hard to get as many crime survivors across the country access to our services. And we have a national alliance of TRCs as a result. There's now 44 of us across the country in 10 different states, and it kind of seems like every week there's new TRCs popping up. There's some coming in New Mexico. I think there's more coming in New York. I don't know if New York is started here. They're popping up everywhere, you know, which is great because that just increases us as an option for support for crime survivors. And so if you're interested, you can learn more about the National Alliance of Trauma Recovery Centers and also our UCSF Trauma Recovery Center online with our website. And stop sharing my screen. But thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Metz, for that presentation. If possible, can you please stay logged on so we can ask questions of the panel after our last presenter? And finally, our last presenter, last but definitely not least, is Lara Drino. She's joining us to close out the panel. Lara is the director of the Children Exposed to Violence Unit for the Los Angeles City Attorney's Office, leading the REACH team, which was the focus of a really amazing site visit yesterday, and which we'll hear more about in a bit. Lara's worked as a prosecutor for nearly 30 years, and she works closely with many multidisciplinary agencies in Los Angeles to prosecute, develop policy intervention, and more centering on issues of child abuse and trauma. Lara also teaches classes for law enforcement, social workers, and advocates, and is a guest teacher at UCLA, USC, and Cal State LA. Lara's passion is making sure children's voices are heard in the criminal justice system and the community. Lara, thank you for joining us today. We're really excited for your presentation. I've had the opportunity to talk with her for the last 9 months, multiple times, and just they are doing amazing work. Thank you.
No? Okay, now it's on. Okay. Thank you so much for having me. And for those that were on the site visit yesterday, I'm sorry I couldn't be there. I was actually speaking at a child abuse conference in Denver, but I jam-packed your schedule and I'm sure you're all exhausted. I just wanted to make sure that you really got to see all of our partners and the work that we're doing. I feel like you planned this panel because I sat on the board of Women Against Gun Violence for 5 years, and Hope and Heal Fund is a big supporter of Women Against Gun Violence and our Talk project, and that is talking to parents about safe gun storage. And then Kevin is going to be training as part of one of our new grants, all of our partners from the police officers, mental health workers, the whole REACH team, LAUSD, we are going to do a pilot in Watts to really just saturate that area with a trauma-informed approach where all parties are speaking the same language. We're all trained the same, we're all speaking the same language. So I was so excited when I heard that Kevin was going to be here as well. And then Jose, your story is why we created this program. So, and I have had many men say to me, I wish your program was around when I was a kid because I could have used it. And so with that, I will explain to you what the Children Exposed to Violence REACH team is. For 25 years, I prosecuted domestic violence and child abuse cases, and for 14 years, child sex abuse cases. And so I witnessed a lot of trauma with the victims on my cases, and I really did love giving kids a voice in the courtroom and letting them know that they were believed, and watching the transformation from the time I first met them before I filed the case to when the perpetrator was held accountable, and just watching that growth and encouraging those children to get mental health help. And I would have long talks with them about why it was important to do it now and not wait till later where it will affect their relationships. And so in 2017, I became the director of child abuse policy and prevention for the city attorney. And I didn't have like a lot of guidance of what I was supposed to do when I first got the position. And so I wanted to come up with some kind of prevention program. So I went to Southeast LA, and for about 9 months, I just listened. I went to meetings, I talked to community members, I went to schools, I talked to parents, I did surveys with parents about what are you most concerned about for your children? Is it gangs? Is it graffiti? Is it domestic violence? Is it gun violence? What are you most concerned about for your kids? And what I learned after talking to all these people, listening to people, going to meetings, and what really struck me was the first meeting I went to was the Watts Gang Task Force meeting. And it was the day after Easter of 2017. I'll never forget it. And the meetings always started with everyone holding hands and saying a prayer. And they said, let's give ourselves a hand. There were no homicides this weekend. And that had such an impact on me, because where I live, there are no homicides usually in a year. And so to think that they were clapping because nobody had been murdered over the weekend really made an impact. And I realized in listening that gun violence was causing so much community trauma and causing trauma for children. And so I lucked out because Children's Institute has a campus in Southeast LA in Watts, and on the Watts Gang Task Force board, one of the secretaries the secretary of the Watts Gang Task Force works at Children's Institute. So I knew about Children's Institute from prosecuting child sex abuse cases. So I went up, I talked to her, and pretty soon I met with the team over there and asked them to help me develop the Children Exposed to Violence, the REACH team. And we partnered with Children's Institute and with LAPD because I wanted to be a crisis response team that had therapists, that had care coordinators, case managers that went to the scene when gun violence, shooting, homicide, robbery, anything with a gun happened. I wanted there to be crisis counseling right there. Not a phone call, not a referral, a person that holds that family's hand, a person that works with that kid right when it happens. Because everybody always says, and I know you all know this, and most of the people in the room know this, but the root cause is adverse childhood experiences. And when that's going to get out to the general public, where people really understand that, I'm just waiting for that day. I just did a training with LAPD where they had a whole day training on trauma, and they had me come in and talk to them for an hour. And none of them had heard about ACEs. And I completely depressed them because when I explained it to them, they all have 4 or more. And that's part of why they became police officers. And I had them fill something out anonymously and give it to me. And honestly, what you said, Jose, is so true. They witnessed domestic violence. They, grew up with physical abuse. They, lost or were raised by a single mom. Their dad abandoned them, or whatever, all the ACEs that are there. And they're out there with untreated trauma too. And there's a stigma for them to get mental health counseling. I see the younger police officers don't have that. When I've talked to the younger ones, they're okay. They understand about self-care and mental health. It's okay not to be okay and all of that. So I feel hope there. And I spend a lot of time talking to the police officers about their trauma and how it must be really hard to see dead bodies and to see children injured and to see all of the horrific things they see on a day-to-day basis. And they need to process it. They need to not just stuff it down. And so what I tried to do is, by bringing them in, and because I'm a prosecutor, they can tell me everything. I can read police reports. And so the way the REACH team really works, and I'm kind of going off my PowerPoint because there's so much to say here, but I guess I have control of it, don't I? I'll play a little video that was on A&E. A lot of newspapers and television, they want to do a story on the REACH team, but they want to follow us and follow a family. And I say to them, I love that you want to tell the story, but we don't do this work for publicity. We do this work because we care about the families, and I will not violate their trust. And kind of like when I prosecuted child sex abuse and they'd want to do a press release, I'd say that's not why I do this work. And so they followed us in a way, but not with a family. So, I don't know if the volume. Maybe not, no volume. Oop. We can skip it if it's okay. We can skip it. We'll just skip it. Okay. So as you all know, the reality is that gun violence causes trauma. But the problem is that trauma therapy is not usually offered unless the child is the victim. So through like the Victims of Crime State Fund, victims were not identified if they were indirectly affected by gun violence. And many times the children that were affected by the gun violence weren't listed in a police report because they weren't the direct victim, but they were definitely affected by it. And so that's another reason why we wanted to make sure that children were receiving the support that they needed. And the way to do that was we have started with $150,000 was our pilot. We had one care coordinator, a part-time therapist, and myself. And we were making sure that when the kids needed therapy, they didn't have to rely on reimbursements and other types of funding, that the therapist would be available for them right here and then. Now we have a lot more money through grants, and that's the beauty of this program is our therapists are just REACH team therapists. So there are no wait lists for our kids. And now, literally today, we're uploading another grant to add adult mental health with Tessie Cleveland, one of our other partners. And I see Robert Bird here from DMH. We are partnering with DMH as well to help train everybody through CTIP, which is part of Kevin, and Lionel is in the audience too. And we're just really trying to find a way to bring all these agencies together, because the only way we're going to really tackle this is if we're all working together. So what the REACH team, well, I'm going to skip through this because these are all the things that we will respond to. And in 2022, because of COVID, because children were locked inside behind closed doors, we added children exposed to any violence. So we now handle domestic violence, you know, brother and sister, any kind of violence, we now will respond within the first 24 hours unless LAPD calls us out to the scene. So if they call us out to the scene, we go with therapists and care coordinators right then and there and do crisis counseling, talk to the parents, come back the next day with care packages, a therapist, and get them started right away. One of the things that I learned over time, so REACH, the REACH team stands for Respond, Educate, Advocate, Community Healing for Kids. And what I learned over time was these families needed so much more. They needed to be stabilized before they would be able to accept mental health counseling for their kids. And so luckily with an agency like CII that has, you know, philanthropy funding and other kind of funding, we were able to do that. So one of the things our care coordinators do is we respond to the scene when LAPD calls us, or we make contact with the family the first 24 hours. I read all the police reports in the morning, first thing in the morning. They usually come in 6:30, 7 in the morning, and I then go through them and I send out notification to the supervising therapist at Children's Institute. She then will assign a care coordinator and therapist to that family. The care coordinator reaches out to that family. It might be 6 hours after the incident. It might be 24 hours after the incident, but they start trying to make contact with the family. They set up a time to come visit. It's usually that same day, same week, definitely or the next day, and they bring care packages to the kids. We partnered with My Stuff Bags, who donates all the care packages, and then they explain what our program is. But what the care coordinators do when they get to the house that first time is they find out, what does this family need? Like, yes, they need mental health, definitely. But if mom needs diapers, or they need food, or they need to get out of the house that they're in because of danger, we got to work on that first before we can even talk to them about mental health. And so as this has progressed over the years, not only have we expanded geographically, but we've also expanded programmatically, if that's a word. And so now we will kind of assess the family, see what they need, get their basic needs met. And we've also created something, and I know you that went on the site tour yesterday, met a lot of our LA Community Resource Coalition partners, which are other nonprofits that are really doing the work. And that's a huge thing. And I think I've said it to some of you. I get so frustrated with people that say they're doing all this stuff, but they're not really doing it. And so one thing that I do is I go with the team. I go out occasionally with them. I go to every call when we get called to a crime scene to make sure we're really doing what we say that we're doing. because I don't want to be that program that looks pretty on paper, but it's not doing the work. And so what we can do is we can kind of look at the whole family once we start working with a family and say, hey, does dad need a job? Because that would lower the stress. Okay, let's call Manny at Driving Hope because he does career counseling and he has 2 trade schools himself and he's connected to all the trade schools and he has grants where he can house people who are just getting out of prison or just, have a prior record. And he can get them into trade school for free and then they are guaranteed placed in a job. So in Nickerson Gardens, where some of you went the other day, we have 6 bounty hunter bloods who just graduated from welding school. And they're going to make a good living now because they are going to get placed into a job. So now we've just helped stabilize that family a little bit. Maybe the children are stuck at home right after school and it's not safe for them to be outside. Well, let's get them into Strive. You went to Strive, those of you. Let's get them into Strive where we can get them up to grade level education-wise, because a lot of them, because of COVID, are very far behind in school. And Strive will do tutoring and homework, but also enrichment programs. Maybe you went to Operation Progress. If the children are in 3rd grade, maybe Operation Progress is an option for the kids. So we have all of these community partners that we work with. We also put on community events that we always invite our families to. You met Sisters of Watts. They're amazing. As they say, they put the unity in community and they do the work. They do the work and they are a great partner. And they will call me and say, hey, Lara, we have a family that needs the Reach team's help. And so we start getting referrals from the people in the community who we work with. So it's not just through the police reports, it's through our relationship building. We're always building relationships in the community through outreach events and, through our partners. So let me just switch this here. So a lot of times people say to me, well, you're a prosecutor. Why are you doing this? This doesn't make sense. And I always say, this is like my dream job. I went to college to be a social worker and everybody was so negative. They're like, oh, that's awful career and you'll make no money and this and that. And I met someone and I decided, you know what, maybe as a prosecutor, I'll have more power to really help people. And I've always done that, even with people that I'm prosecuting. If I want to get to the root cause, and I've always felt that way for 30 years. Why is this domestic violence happening in this home? What can we do to help this person? Do they have a drinking problem? Do they have an anger problem? Now I understand adverse childhood experiences. And I'll be honest, I didn't know all about that. I lucked out right when I got this position. The study came out, the 20-year study came out about adverse childhood experiences. And I just, I met Dr. Folletti and Dr. Nadine Burke-Harris, and I went to lectures and I learned all about it. And I feel like once you know that, you never look at someone the same way. And when you were talking about untreated trauma, I mean, sometimes I'll see people and I'll think, oh, that's what untreated adverse childhood experiences look like when they're acting out unreasonably. And so that brings me back to the kids. So educating the parents about trauma is so critical because so often kids will say like, oh, I can't go to school, I have a stomach ache, or I have a headache. And the parents are like, you're not sick. And explaining to them that that could be trauma physically manifesting itself. There have been a lot of aha moments with parents about that. When I first drove around and I saw the candle memorials where somebody had been killed the night before, I thought to myself, wait a minute. So these kids are walking to school. They're like 8 years old. They're walking to school and they know someone was murdered there. They know that's why the candles are there. And then they're supposed to go sit in their chair, not talk to anyone about it, and learn their times tables. It's not realistic. It's just not realistic. And we have LAUSD mental health, Pia and Joel in the room, and they're great partners because when we're working with kids, I will reach out to them and members of their team and say, hey, we're working with a family and the kids go to LAUSD schools. Can you make sure they're getting extra support at school? And I heard somebody asked about Handle with Care yesterday. Was it? Okay, so we are launching Handle with Care in Watts as part of our overall program, and we'll be doing that with the CSP officers. So I will train them on how to use it, and we will be using San Diego developed an app. So, are you? Okay, yes. Oh, okay, so you know Brooke probably who runs it. Okay, so yes, so we have an MOU with San Diego and they're going to give us the app. So we're really excited about that and working with Pia and Joel and their team. And so that's like another thing, another layer of what we're going to be doing. But just educating the parents, educating law enforcement, going to community meetings and educating the community about trauma and what it could look like in their kids has really made a big difference, and a big difference as far as people accepting mental health services. COVID made it okay for this community to accept mental health services because we could say, your kids are suffering because of COVID, being locked inside, having no socialization, and then this happened on top of it. We want to help. And we saw a big difference in our numbers as far as, especially in the Black community, accepting services. When we first started, it was about 65-35, 65 Hispanic accepting services and 35 Black. During COVID, it went 50-50 because all of a sudden it became okay. And one of the things with our new grant is it's the recast grant, and it's about creating community resilience and breaking stigmas of mental health. And so we are going to be working with the youth on campaigns, social media campaigns. I know we had the talk about social media, but we want to use it for good reason to make TikTok videos about mental health, about how it's okay to get help for mental health. And we really want to engage the youth in that. One thing that I'm trying to do is change the narrative between the police and the community, and especially this next generation. And I think those who were there yesterday saw that what the media portrays is not always accurate. In Watts, the CSP officers are not hated. They're the community safety police officers. Obviously, there's some people that don't like them, but sometimes those are the people that are breaking the law, so they don't like them. But they work with the community. They work to help kids excel. They are coaches of sport programs of the Watts Rams with community members. So there's dads from the community and police officers that are coaching the Watts Rams, an after-school program that's sponsored by the LA Rams. So I'm really working hard to do that by having groups of kids with police officers, and we sit around and we talk about gun violence. And what does that look like? How does it make you feel? And the number one thing kids say to me is they're tired of the grownups there saying to them, it's normal. Like, get over it. This is normal here. And it's not normal. And the kids say that. It's not normal. This shouldn't be normal. I shouldn't have to lay down on the floor because 12 bullets just came into our house. And that happens every day there. And I say to people that I know that have no idea Do you realize what's happening 20 miles from your house? It's a war zone. Every day there's a shooting. I just ran the statistics last night, and year to date, in the city of LA, there have been 106 homicides. There are 21 LAPD police divisions. 33, so almost a third of the homicides have happened in Southeast Division, where the REACH team is, 77th Division, where the REACH team is, and Southwest Division, where we're just starting. And the majority in 77th and Southeast. And they're not all gang violence. Some of them are neighborhood disputes. It's almost like COVID just unleashed this fury, and then people have guns. And so that's how they're solving problems. The way people used to solve problems, maybe they'd punch each other or yell at each other, and now they're shooting each other, road rage. We are seeing things with gun violence that is completely different than what we used to see. And so COVID really exacerbated it, and the numbers were rising, every day. There were weekends and weeks, I shouldn't even say weekends, because shootings happen on a Tuesday at 11 in the morning. There's never a time when there won't be a shooting. I've learned that having worked there for so many years now. So we work with kids who are directly exposed or who are indirectly exposed. You all already know this, why it's important to treat trauma early. And I always say there are no bad children. There are bad circumstances that happen to children that cause them to act out. And so if we can intervene early while their brains are developing so they don't become a victim again, or so they stop whatever path they're going towards ending up in the criminal justice system. And that's really why I chose to do this and put this together, was because I don't want to see this next generation in the criminal justice system. And if we can intervene and get them the support that they need while they're young, then maybe we have a chance of keeping them out of the system. So I already told you how the REACH team works. And we have an 800 number. And with our new grant, we have added Tessie Cleveland. Everyone they hire is from the community, looks like the community. And we are hoping to get this latest grant where we will have a therapist in the car a couple days a week with the CSP officers who will be willing and able to get out of the car and do crisis counseling and de-escalation. We did it one day to see how it went, and it was amazing. The therapist was able to completely de-escalate a situation, and she was also able to offer crisis counseling right away. I know we need to save time for questions, but I guess, and I have so many stories I could tell you of families and things that we've worked with, but I guess what I would say is this model's working, but we need funding across systems. We can't keep chasing the grants, because what happens is one grant ends, and then I think we're going to be able to hire 2 more care coordinators. But now we got to switch the care coordinators where the grant ended over to the new grant, and we are expanding because it's so needed. I mean, LAPD, they love this program because we take care of the stuff that they can't, that they're not trained for. And so, captains will call me, and people really want this. The community wants this. Like I said, I've had people say, where were you when I was a kid? This might have helped me. And so I guess if there's a way to get funding across systems, like, we need for the city, for the county, for the nonprofits, for even agencies like, nonprofits like Sisters of Watts. I mean, they're doing amazing things, but they are hustling to try and and be able to feed the community. They feed the community all the time. The East Side Riders, I don't think you met them. They're a bicycle, and they teach kids how to ride bikes, and they go on bike rides around Ted Watkins Park. And all of these partners that will help heal, really heal a community by giving kids opportunities and maybe getting them off their phones, because they'll be busy. They'll be doing sports or enrichment, or you didn't even meet Marching Beauties. That's like for a self-esteem for young girls. And they learn all sorts of things. And I was just at an event where one of the Marching Beauties, she got accepted into 12 colleges. And she said, I never thought I was going to college, ever. But because of this program, this 10-week program, she is now going to college. And the partners are raising money to make sure that she can succeed in college. And so I just don't know how we can just keep chasing grants, but I have a model for this that could be replicated. It's just funding is the difficulty. And so I'm thankful that we have DMH here and LAUSD, because they are partners as well. And I'm hoping that we can all work together more. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lara. And I've had the opportunity to hear about the REACH program so many times now. And I wish you had more time, because what you guys are doing is so inspirational. And I'm honored that I've gotten to go out and see what it's like on several occasions. And I'll just say, you're such a big part of that community that even yesterday I was given a ride back by one of your officers, and people were stopping him every other block to like do a fist bump through the window. So I was like, I gotta go. But thank you so much, everyone, all the panelists. This has been such a great presentation. I think the timing is great. It's meaningful. Yesterday was the anniversary of Uvalde, I believe, which is one of the things that triggered us kind of stepping into this work. So thank you all for the work that you do. I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to Chair Madrigal-Weiss to open up for commissioner comments.
Thank you, Commissioner Bunch. I'd like to thank Kevin, Jose, Cuco, Sarah, and Lara for being here. Thank you for your presentations. And I'd like to thank Commissioner Bunch and all of your guests again for the wonderful presentations today. Again, this is such an important topic, and we appreciate the opportunity to have a thoughtful, deliberate discussion to inform the next steps the commission would like to take. It's been a long day, I'm sorry. I would like to invite commissioners to offer comments or ask questions of the panel.
Sorry, I just gave it back to you, but I'm going to start by thanking Courtney Ackerman for all the work that she's done over the last 9 months. Amazing job.
Is she back there? Yes. Courtney, you got to stand because we can't see you behind the podium. There she is. Round of applause for Courtney. Commissioners, questions or comments to our panel, please. Commissioner Carnevale.
You know, sometimes I feel like government is an insane asylum. So so first of all, the panel, incredible. Now I understand. Everywhere we went, people were like, oh, too bad Lara wasn't here. She's the reason I'm here. Too bad she, amazing. So it's such a powerful panel, and then connected to our site visit yesterday. But so we listen to these national debates. Every time there's a mass shooting, it's like, gotta control guns, gotta have mental health, and then nothing happens, of course. And have I got this wrong, or is this like an answer? It's not the only answer, but it's a piece of the puzzle. And my understanding is we're talking about standing up firearm violence and trying to educate more, but do we not go beyond education and start to say, here's a solution? How do we get this funded? How do we stand these programs up more and say, we've got answers, but we're just not doing them. And, you know, to me, I guess and I may have missed it, but my viewpoints shifted from education to action. And everybody knows we have to do something. So here we go. But people don't do it because they don't know what's actionable. We say mental health, but sure, okay, let's get more therapists. But here's a program. This makes sense to me. Why are we not doing this? Sorry, I could go on, but an amazing panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Carnevale. Commissioner Brown.
Thank you. Well, I just want to say to all the panel members, outstanding job. You are one of the most powerful, if not the most powerful panel that I think we've had at the commission. I've been on the commission for 13 years, and I think this has just really resonated with everybody that's been here. So thank you all. And individually, the things that you brought to the table, Dr. Metz, thank you for sharing what you're doing up in San Francisco and how deeply that illustration of the case study of how deeply this problem goes into the person who's affected directly and the people who are indirectly along the way as well. Cuco, great to see you again. Thank you for your passion and your quest for a change. And thank you for, you said something that really resonated about that thing about if you could take all the guns away magically from everybody, would that solve the problem? Some people thinking that it would, but the deeper question of what you said is what makes you feel that that's okay of a response to shoot somebody because you disagree with them. And that's really the core of what we have to try to figure out here. And unfortunately, this issue has become so polarized politically, and people oftentimes will use that as a way to have people paint themselves into corners and to pick up or choose a side, when the reality is this is something that affects all of us and in our communities, and we all need to get behind doing something about it. Kevin, outstanding insight, some great takeaways. Really appreciated your perspective and insight as well. Jose, thank you for sharing your experience, your journey. Thank you for your recovery and your redemption, and for taking negative experiences that you were on the receiving end of and were on the embroiled in, and turning them into something positive. It's very, very fulfilling to see that you're doing that and turning it into something so good. And Lara, so nice to see you again. I didn't get to go out yesterday, but I was there a few months ago and visited, and can't speak highly enough about your program. Just amazing work that you're doing, and you're just such a class act to head it all up. So thank you. Thank you all for a great job.
Thank you, Commissioner Brown. Any other questions, comments? Please, Commissioner Mitchell.
All of your presentations, they were absolutely excellent. I think it was Cuco, you made a comment. I think you said 2/3 of gun violence is not in urban areas. So I kind of wanted to comment on that. And then Lara, I know you're the city attorney, but I'm just curious, what's your relationship with county behavioral health? I mean, like those programs that we saw yesterday, how do you guys play a role with intersecting with the county behavioral health?
And do you mean like DMH? Is that, I'm guessing? Well, CII and Tessie Cleveland both have contracts with DMH. So when the kids, so the REACH team therapists are their salaries are funded through grants so that there's never a wait list. And so our program offers up to 6 sessions with no paperwork, just consent of the parent. To make it really easy, our therapist will go to the house, we'll meet the kids wherever is most convenient. If the kids need long-term therapy and the parents agree to it because of complex trauma, or maybe it was a loss, a homicide of a family member that, that's really causing a lot of trauma, then they will be referred into one of Children's Institute's long-term programs. And those therapists, I believe, and I don't know all the nuances, are funded through DMH. If the DMH therapists that work at Children's Institute or that's funded has a wait list, they can't see the kids, our reach team therapists will stay with the kids until the long-term therapist can take them. So even if they have to stay with the reach team therapist 10 sessions, then we'll do a warm handoff. So at the first session with the long-term therapist, the reach team therapist will be there with the child to do that handoff so that the child feels like this is an okay person for me now to talk to. And the reach team therapist can talk to the long-term therapist about what happened, what's going on, where they're at in their therapy. So that's kind of how we work right now with them. I have met with the Office of Violence Prevention. I have, we're in talks. We have an MOU with the city and the county agreeing to work together on gun violence prevention. And so I'm trying to bring us all together, and my LAUSD partners and DMH partners, we all want to work together because the city and county never seem to work together. And I go to all these meetings where I'm the only city person, and I'm always like, wait, the city. And I say the city's in the county, so we should all be working together. And I feel like we're finally getting there. I mean, I'm 30 years in, so I'm like, I gotta see it work before I retire. And so we're working really hard to all work together to address this problem and maybe find a way to have reach teams in the county as well. Because the thing is a lot of people will say, oh, we have a crisis response team. But when I ask them, that's where my prosecutorial skills come in and I cross-examine them. They don't have therapists going out doing prevention work. They have therapists going out declaring someone 5150. That's not what the reach team is. The reach team is prevention. And they don't have the hand holding. They hand them a piece of paper and say, here's a list of therapists that the state will pay for. And that's not going to work in these communities. That's not going to work. They need someone to be there, to support them, to hold their hand, to come to their house to provide services. And so that's the model that Children's Institute, LAPD, and the city attorney's office has created, and it works. And that's why I want to see people follow that model and not say that they're a crisis response team when they're not actually doing it. So, and I, might make somebody angry for saying that, but that's what I've seen, so.
Yeah, I mean, what was it specifically? I mean, the data, to be honest with you, one of the reasons we're doing, and I'm sure many of you are familiar with GIS work, is that the data in California and even across the country around gun violence is very difficult to collect. We have having worked in the county system, I think the challenges is sometimes the infrastructure doesn't exist or the technology doesn't exist for us to do EHRs or all the other things. Systems don't talk to each other. Here we have a case where the state has an effective data collection system, CalDVRS, and only like half the counties participate around gun violence. So we looked at a variety of different data sets and including the gun violence archives. And that's what we utilized to map homicides, but really because mathematically it wasn't adding up. When you know the total gun deaths in the state of California, you also know the population sizes. For LA, you know the data. So when you add those up, you're like, okay, this isn't adding up to the majority. And what happens is what gets lost, and the reason we did this is what gets lost is the 3 and 4s, or the 5 homicides or 6 homicides or 7 homicides that occur in Lompoc, which is Latino, African-American, and white, which doesn't seem very high when you total that population with the total county population of Santa Barbara. But if you live in Lompoc within a 1 mile radius, that's super high. That's 3 times the state average. So that's part of the reason we set forth. So this is new data. We'll probably be releasing this in the next 3 or 4 weeks. it allows counties and communities to look at their own information. And unfortunately, I can tell you right now, when we work in some communities for people like Jose and others that do this work, say, I remember when that shooting happened, because we can map it in terms of homicides to the street. So that's helpful. It's helpful to be as an artist. I think I told you, I chose to be an engineer, still an artist. This is like the visualization of math and data. It's beautiful because you can see the pictures and you can see that. So I would urge folks to, like I said, I do want to come back when we map. We're not mapping locations. We're mapping it by county. When we map suicides. Because then when you combine the two and also intimate partner violence, you get a very different visualization. It also is for us as a philanthropic partner, but also a partner with government entities, that should help dictate the direction that you fund and the interventions that you're funding and where. The geography is important as well. So I don't know if that answered your question.
And can I just tell you, for our new grant, I had to pull all the LAPD statistics. And just this year alone, just up until May 21st, in the city of Los Angeles, there have been 1,296 shootings across different kinds of crimes, and 421, about 32%, were in the area of South LA. So kind of matches up with the homicide numbers for this year as well. So just to get an idea of Los Angeles.
Any other? I don't see anybody online.
Madam Chair.
Please.
So question, how much money does it take? How much money do you need to sustain this program for what REACH does today, for the city, for the county, for the state? Have you done any of those calculations?
I have not done that because it hasn't been an option. So I haven't done that. And part of it is, when we first started, it was just the mental health. And then we learned it's so much more than the mental health piece. It's stabilizing the families, having the kids have something to do that's of interest to them, to keep them off the streets, to keep them from wanting to join gangs, to keep them from being victimized. And so with that, in our new grants, we'll have, $40,000 towards youth programming and another amount towards training. So our amounts have gone up because we're trying to do so much more. All of our grants right now are federal grants. Difficulty on that is you cannot buy any food and you cannot have an outreach event without having some kind of food. So that's always a challenge. So I mean, I've looked at the city of LA, and LAPD is divided into 4 bureaus. And the way that I've looked at it, ideally, if we could have 8 care coordinators and 4 full-time therapists in each bureau, I think we could do it. But I'd have to talk to my nonprofit partners to see how much that would cost. And I also have started looking at other nonprofits in other parts of the city because they have to be reputable in that area. So like in the Valley, I know I have a relationship with Strength United. CII is not known in the Valley. So we need to bring in different nonprofits. And I have other nonprofits that would love to be part of it because they believe in it too. So
and I would add that I hope that part of the analysis is also, what does it cost you to do nothing?
Right.
Because that's the part that we forget.
Yeah,
absolutely. So Madam Chair, I tried this last month, not so successfully, but let me try it again this month. I looked at our fiscal transparency tool, and I believe it said that LA County has $1 billion of unspent money that comes through our system. So how is it that they're not standing on their tables pushing money into a program like this? How is it that Karen Bass is not standing on her table demanding these solutions as part of to address these problems? What can we be doing to cause that to occur? It just seems crazy to me.
Yeah, that's the question.
I want to say, I don't know that she knows all about it. And I do have a meeting coming up with her Deputy Mayor of Community Safety to talk to her about it. So we are trying to let them know about it.
And hopefully we have this meeting uploaded so that you can maybe share some of the footage of the questions and what we're seeing here. Also, I wanted to, and I'll get to you, Commissioner Mitchell. I want to ask, with recent changes in Medi-Cal, will any of that allow you to bill for services?
I'm not the person to ask as a lawyer. Probably maybe DMH or LAUSD knows that better than I do. Do any of you know?
So
there's a new bill, managed care, that allows the reimbursement rate is so low. It's not, you're better off through mental health, which that's where I started my career, having a licensed clinician do paraprofessionals. A lot of what gang intervention specialists, violence, a lot of these violence interruptions is reimbursable. But they created another avenue, but the reimbursement rate is so low that there's no way it can be sustainable. That's my opinion when I look at the numbers. So, but anyways.
Yeah, and we need to increase salaries for therapists so people want to become therapists. And for the care coordinators, like people that are doing this work and they're in the street and they're putting their lives at risk. I mean, I drive around South LA now going, oh, we helped a family there. Oh, there was a shooting there. There was this here and stuff. It's traumatic just working in that environment, knowing that at any moment there could be a shooting. And so we need to pay people for their worth, for the work that they're doing. And I'm just not seeing that. And so it's hard to get people to want to do that work. And I really feel like even with the reimbursement, I mean, I have good insurance and I can't find a therapist for myself or my daughter. I have to pay out of pocket tons of money because insurance doesn't reimburse enough. So nobody wants to do therapy with insurance. So and then imagine, like, I'm a lawyer, I can try and figure things out. If you can't navigate systems, I mean, you just give up. And that's where kind of I come in, and any prosecutor, not just me, comes in as an attorney, is navigating the system. I call DCFS, I call the coroner's office to get a body, released to families so they can have closure and bury their loved one. My care coordinator wouldn't get to the top of DCFS. That's why it helps to have a lawyer or a prosecutor on the team to navigate those kind of systems.
Thank you. Commissioner Mitchell?
They absolutely, it does not make sense why they don't have a swimming pool. So when you have that conversation with the mayor, it would be very, very helpful.
Are you talking about in Imperial Courts or where are you talking in Imperial Courts?
The one next to the Sisters of Watts. There's a park right there.
Oh, Ted Watkins Park.
Yes.
Yeah,
correct.
one they don't charge for.
Right.
That's right, that they don't charge you.
That's that one's a county park. So yeah, I don't know.
$1 billion.
Thank you, Commissioner Carnevale. I did want, my comment is this, Cuco, thank you so much for gathering the numbers that you can gather. The fact that only some counties participate, I'm assuming it's not a mandate. And so with only some, we only have half the picture. So I think that's something for us to continue to ask about. Kevin, I could not agree with you more. When we talk about regression, we're seeing that in schools. We're constantly trying to remind everybody, think of age, count 3 years back. I'm a mom of a 19-year-old and a 24-year-old. I was waiting for that at 25, the brain develops, and I am now back down to 21. And I am back down to 16, and that is my reality. And so that is so true. When I'm talking to third grade teachers and they're like exhausted, I'm like, it's really kindergarten. And we just have got to give ourselves grace and understand and focus on the fact that until we stabilize, until we really build in that compassion and understanding, the academics is not happening. So let's focus on the love and the compassion before we can even get to the other pieces of it. So thank you for sharing that message again. Jose, when I heard that because your son was identified as a documented gang member and the family would not then qualify for services, that doesn't even compute. How do we break the cycle of pain and suffering, right? So we got there somehow. As you said, right? The trauma causing trauma. So for the system to say, no, you don't then get services that you absolutely could benefit and that could help serve to break that cycle, there's something really wrong when we're doing that. It's subjective. It's people making decisions towards other people's lives that are outside of the circle of human connectedness, which is just touches me at the core. So I hope that we continue to stay grounded in what's really important and how, and I think this goes back to when we were talking about this earlier, how important it is our community's voice here, because we have to be, it's the community that needs to be shaping the policies and how we make these decisions. So thank you so much for sharing that. And thank you for being here. And thank you for being here. I appreciate that. Lara, your name came up probably every 15 minutes yesterday. And so it is an inspiration from the PD to the law enforcement officers who spoke highly. Their stories, how they describe the community, very different language than, you know, I work with different law enforcement agencies and I think it's gotten better. What I saw yesterday though, really unique, really beautiful. And everybody's connected. The language is braided together between the systems. And so that was powerful to see. I agree, we need to do something. You know, when we're talking about charging people for their local parks, something's really wrong with that, especially when we need a place for young people to be engaged. So you have our full support and we're listening, and we definitely want to find ways. When the city attorney's office is leading the effort with law enforcement and the mental health partner is not front and center, then we need to continue to ask questions and see what we can do. I hear you, Commissioner Carnevale, the $1 billion, I hear you.
I have to say something.
Please.
The National District Attorneys Association told me that they did a study, and for whatever reason, I don't understand it, but prosecutor-led programs are more successful than any other program. So I don't know why, but they did a study, and that's
well,
what they
hats off. And I will tell you that Handle with Care is being led by our DA. So there you go. So I want to congratulate you all. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for all the work that's happening out there. And I'm going to invite Vice Chair Alvarez to say a few words.
And I'm not going to take very long because I know we're very short on time. I also just wanted to express my appreciation to each of you for your leadership and for being with us today. And when I really emphasize what I'm hearing you, Lara, say is what in the health space, but also in the education space, we're calling a whole child approach, that it's not one division's responsibility, that there is a responsibility of our agencies to work across sectors in order to take care of the whole child, the whole family, the whole community. And I'm also hearing that we need to move the responsibility of navigating those systems and funding streams from families and organizations to government itself, and find ways to blend our programs and braid our funding in a way that works for people. And so, you know, in our work again around strategic direction and the way the commission is headed, how do we center these experiences to think through our whatever oversight role we have that really holds our county partners accountable to working across departments in order to be able to fund initiatives such as this. That's one. And then second, we talk a lot about learning communities, Toby, and uplifting best practices and sharing them so that other counties can benefit. I think this is one incredible opportunity to do the same, to ensure that it's not only Los Angeles County that benefits from such initiatives, but that we have the opportunity to take such programs to scale across the state. So again, thank you for your leadership and your heart and everything you do for our communities.
Thank you, Vice Chair. So at this time, we are going to move for members of the public to make public comment on this agenda item by clicking the raise hand button on your computer and or on the app if calling in by phone, *9. Once the public comment period for this agenda item starts, we will close the public comment queue. So please make your request to comment now. Are there any public comments? Please raise your hand now as the queue will be closing. We would ask that you please limit your public comments to 3 minutes or less. Mariani, please open the line for public comment on agenda item 6. And let's start with comments from the room.
Madam Chair, we have one comment in the room. Steve McNally.
Hello, my name's Steve McNally. I'm from Orange County, and I have a son with schizophrenia, and all his relationships are restored. I'm also on the county board. I'd suggest you get this in front of the LA Mental Health Commission. One thing I'm truly inspired by a couple of things. One is people do make a difference, even when they work in very bureaucratic settings where people would rather push reports, almost like that movie Office Space. I don't get the same dedication, the feeling of being patient-centric or person-centric from a lot of our state agencies. And the other thing I was struck by is what you piece together might already exist in the current funding streams, except nobody talks to each other. And it's not a say yes culture. It's not, I do what I do, and I do it really good, and I only do this podium. But I can't tell you what feeds into my podium. I can't tell you what my exit is, and I don't really care. And so I'm not looking to leverage the money. The other is that most of us who are curious learners want to know how the thing works in simple terms. And so the data that you presented looked at it a little bit differently. And we live in a state that doesn't really care about data that much, even though it's available. It's almost as if I hoard the data, nobody knows the data, then I can just create my own narrative and say something's terrific. And as people who live the journey, the silos only hurt one person, and that's families and loved ones. It doesn't hurt the system. The system continues on. People get paid pretty good, I think, in some of these jobs. And yet they don't take ownership of recovery. And recovery isn't really that difficult. It's complicated, but it's really simple, right? It's acceptance, awareness, and meeting people where they're at. And it's so frustrating to see us spend so much money not doing that. So I'm really excited that when I see people can make a difference and make a difference in other people to get other people excited. Commissioner Carnevale asked the question I was going to ask, which was, how much money do you actually need? And that's always a good be able to answer that question. And the second thing, and the last thing is, because I got to go to my Chatty Steve 12-step program, is I always wish that in addition to being informed, that every presentation empowered everyone in the room to do something for you, whatever that might be. Could be as simple as put 988 in the phone list. It could be something else, but—
Thank you, Steve. We're at time. If you could please wrap up.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve.
Line, we have Mark Carmax. Your line is open.
Hi, this is Mark Carmax. Again, I'd like to talk about the California Association of CAPS Academy, and that started with San Francisco, and also it's Project Return is part of it. A lot of your things that you were talking about today, that would be applied under some of that stuff. I would say take a look into those programs. And also, I'd like to ask the last three presenters if they have peer supporters within their programs. And I would like to hear the answer.
Yes, we have peer specialists and parent helpers in our program that are from the community.
Which one are you?
Oh, this is Lara Drino from the REACH team, Children Exposed to Violence. You said the last presenter, so I thought you meant me.
Yeah, you were one of them. So REACH does have. Okay. Continue to work with Project Return and to try to get some of their people into that, because they're doing trainings. They're going to start again on June 6th. So please get some of your people involved in that. And I'd like to talk to, how about the doctor from San Francisco?
Yeah, hi. Hi, Mark. This is Sarah Metz from UCSF TRC. So right now we do not, in our specific program, have peer support, but we work very closely with the Wraparound Project that are, all peer counselors, and we also partner with other community agencies that are peer-based, like, for example, Us for Us Bay Area, but we don't currently.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Mark. Thank you to everyone for joining us today to continue the work and discussions around mental health. We would especially like to thank members of the public. We value your input and participation. Our next commission meeting will take place on June 15th, 2023. It will be virtual via Zoom. We look forward to meeting you then. Today's meeting is adjourned.